The Articulate Coven is the original, unofficial podcast and fan community for Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire and Anne Rice's Immortal Universe from AMC and AMC+. Welcome to The Articulate Coven. We are your hosts. I'm Joel.
I'm Ashley.
And we are The Articulate Coven. The Articulate Coven is the official fan podcast, or unofficial fan podcast. We're not official. We're not official anything.
We're not official at all.
Oh, I'm an official mess is what I am. We're the unofficial fan podcast and fan community for Interview with the Vampire and Anne Rice's Lives of the Mayfair Witches, the Vampire Chronicles overall, as well as specifically AMC and AMC Plus's Immortal Universe, which houses those two series and hopefully many more in the future. We are currently undergoing a rewatch of Season 1 of Interview with the Vampire, and we are here tonight to talk about Episode 2 of Season 1. If you are new to the series, if you're watching this show for the first time, I'd strongly recommend listening to our original episodes about Season 1, because we're going to be talking about this episode and every episode we talk about during this rewatch with the full knowledge of Season 1. So don't be spoiled. Yes. Go back and listen to it when we first watched it as well. Ashley, I'm going to do our template here when we get started, but first of all, what did you think overall of this episode?
Again, I'm having a wonderful time, and everyone should join us if they would like. It was to see... We're seeing a different side of Lestat in this episode. We're seeing anger more. And I think part of it is seeing him in his true form as a vampire. So at this point, he's able to drop any sort of facade that remains that he's been holding up with Louis. And he's able to show himself as he truly is, strength and all that. And I do think we see a very different side of him, obviously, too. We know we're seeing this through possibly very, very unreliable eyes. But we see his anger, we see his the way he can be very biting and the way he can be cruel a little bit. We're seeing some of that in this episode, and it's such a difference from the seductive, seducing Lestat in the first episode, and it just that juxtaposition really struck me a lot more this time around.
So there was a new trailer that dropped for season 2 in between our last recording and this one.
Dang, y'all.
It's a great trailer. Although I will say that's probably the last trailer that I'm going to watch. I think because as we go further, I think they can't help but begin to reveal. I mean, if you're looking for new footage, if you're going to cut something different at this point, you're going to start revealing things that I'd rather see in sequence.
Oh yeah.
But I will say there's a moment in that trailer where Louis calls out to Daniel in the modern day setting. They're at a table seemingly in Dubai, and he says, "I don't remember any of this."
Yes.
Boy, I will say strongly that moment, just as you were just saying, colored my rewatch of this episode even more so than the first episode. We already know there's that possibility hanging out there, and I mentioned it last week. Is this what Armand is telling Louis happened? Is this what Armand told Louis Lestat said, et cetera, et cetera? But I do wonder, and I wondered a lot this week, how much are all three of these people potentially being manipulated, and who is actually pulling the strings.
Right.
So this episode is After the Phantoms of Your Former Self, directed by Alan Taylor, written by Jonathan Chinicheros. Boy, I probably butchered that one. Anne Rice and David B. Harris, those are the three credited writers. The handsome Rashid schools Daniel on art history and then serves dinner, 7 courses plus, as Louis finally rejoins Daniel and the telling of the tale itself. Lestat is an impatient and imperfect teacher for the newborn Louis. They stumble through Louis's mortal death and his first kill as a vampire. Lestat doesn't even explain the sun to Louis before he's burnt badly. While Louis complains about his teacher, he toys with Daniel in the modern day, eating live animals and then a willing human at the table. Louis finds his familial and work life even more complicated in the past, now after the phantoms of his former self have fled. And there's our title working its way into my little description. I'm going to try there you go. I'm trying to be a little artful there in my
No, I love it. Well done.
Here's my question right off the top. I love seeing the Marius painting.
Oh yeah, that room is not of Louis' doing. Like every bit of that space is definitely not Louis' decor style.
So I felt that way too. Although one of our fans on Facebook mentioned the other day, and forgive me, I don't remember now who, and I didn't write this down as a note, but somebody mentioned that in the books, Armand's locales, whenever he sets himself up a space, it's always soft fabrics, lush furnishings, overfilled, overstuffed almost with things to lay upon and look at, and lushness generally is what Armand surrounds himself with. Meanwhile, Louis lives in shacks without any lights on, and sits by candlelight and reads through a giant stack of books, etc. Like at the end of the interview with the vampire film, the one made in the 90s, you see Lestat in a shack in New Orleans that's sort of like run down, but realistically it's Louis who lives in places like that at several different times in the book.
Right, absolutely.
So I don't know anymore exactly who did the decor here.
The line that Rashid Armand says when he says he serves a god, obviously we know he's not serving. We're not talking about Louis. We can't be talking about Louis, right?
I mean, unless that is literally the barest, the simplest, straightforward play would be if Armand as Rashid is literally pretending, I as a normal human am so lowly, even Louis is a god. But again, you asked a couple of episodes ago, are we going to see cheats here, or are they going to play it straightforward?
Right.
And to me, unless they explain it in some fashion by, again,
that feels like a cheat.
Something we've speculated. Like, are there some very special guests downstairs which are causing the groaning, for instance? If that's the case, and that's where we get to eventually, and Armand for some reason is now in charge of them, or at least they're living in his building, well, okay, that would make sense for this line. But basically, anything short of that, I'm genuinely going to call this a cheat. That line doesn't make sense to me coming from the Armand that I know. And so
that's why I feel like it has to be legit, because I just don't think they would cheat.
So why the ruse? That's my big question. Why the ruse? Why at this moment does Armand want Daniel around? Or let's assume for a moment that Louis actually has some free will and that he wants Daniel around at this moment. Why is Armand allowing it? That's my first question.
Are they using Daniel to try to get someone else's attention?
Okay, that would be the answer to my question. Like, why now? Why is this happening now? First of all,
right.
And second of all, why doesn't he want Daniel to know that he's a vampire too? I mean, clearly, whatever.
Well, I don't think he wants to show his cards yet.
I mean, yeah, maybe, but he waits so long to allow that reveal to happen. Like, I want, what is he playing at? What is the point? And if it's not Armand that's playing, who is playing the fiddle here? That's my big question.
Right, mine too.
So, but that leads into the scene where they talk about the groan. I already mentioned it. There's no way that sound that Daniel hears is just the building swaying. No one would pay the exorbitant prices for the penthouse if it also came with an eternal creepy groan.
Yeah,
right?
100%. Like, what is that bullshit? That is like a real bad design flaw. I mean, obviously, there has to be some give and take with buildings of that size in design and things like that. But yeah, there's no way you're paying that amount of money and living in a place that creaks like a damn old haunted mansion.
So my question is, Armand has a Marius painting. Perhaps,
yes, he does.
Perhaps he has some other things that used to belong to Marius?
Perhaps he might have some things that belong to Marius. Now, this begs the question, are we... Oh, I just don't think you can do that. My fear immediately was, are we about to... Thinking of the groan and what could possibly be living under the stairs, not presenting Marius as a character at all. It would be really hard to do the Vampire Lestat without Marius, I think.
Yeah, I don't think you
unless
can.
Armand is filling that character role.
Well, I mean that's possible. I suppose. I got to tell you, if they
I'll
do
hate
that,
it. I'll be so mad.
I'm really going to be disappointed. But here's the other thing too that does is it. First of all, it would almost inherently mean that we have to make Armand older than he is in the books, and like quite a bit older.
Right.
But also, I mean, unless. I mean, I suppose Marius could exist, but only in the past, right? Like Marius has already died for whatever reason. My speculation, based on that train of thinking, is that it's not Marius in charge anymore, and that someone else has already awoken. And the god that they serve is very specifically Akasha.
Right.
And that she's calling the shots and wants Daniel back out, and that it's Akasha that is trying to coax Lestat out of hiding wherever he might be, not Armand and Daniel. Which, okay, if that is the way that it plays out, first and foremost, it means that we can jump both getting into the Vampire Lestat novel, heavily, but also we can do Queen of the Damned at the same time, or some of it anyway, which will be exciting. But it would also mean that we're going to get not only like the reveal of that, but then also we have the opportunity to set up a real like babyface turn for Armand. If it seems as if all this time he's been pulling strings and, manipulating Louis or controlling Louis and or controlling Lestat, but it turns out he himself is being controlled and in fact ends up as part of the revolution, against her. That's a way to make him, no matter what he's done in the past and all these things that we see, even as a TV viewer, you can go, oh, I'm fine. He's one of the good guys now because
Look, we've
got a much bigger
of
bad.
Bullshit from our vampires. Like, they've all been assholes. They've all done some creepy shit. But
and it's like, the Punisher looks bad until Thanos shows up, and then the Punisher's on your team, right?
Right, absolutely.
So Louis, as soon as he's turned, let's go back to the schooling here. There's the scene in the graveyard, the cemetery, where they're, sort of
disposing of the priest,
but also disposing of Louis's mortal body. And then right after that, we go into downtown New Orleans. First of all, I love the way, and it happens, the first time you see it in the episode is when Louis looks up at the statue in the cemetery, which is a direct, I think, call out towards the 90s Interview with the Vampire movie. Well, no, remember there's the scene in the graveyard where the statue moves, where Louis sees the statue move once he becomes a vampire.
I feel like that's in the book as well.
Yeah, I think they do talk about statues almost seem to come to life or something like that. Yeah, he talks about the vibrancy with which he sees the living world, which it makes sense if you think, and I don't think Anne was thinking about this, but you think about what we know now about like the nature of things, and like literally there are no solid surfaces. It's all just vibrating molecules and atoms, right? So like the vampires sort of see that at some level, I think, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, seeing beyond like the, our visual spectrum, which I think is just incredible to see, like the idea of seeing different layers and even seeing like heat and coolness. And I love the idea of that. I think they did such a great job. And of course, like also them walking into New Orleans proper out of the cemetery. We go from a really dark place to this very light, vibrant, very alive spot. And it's just really cool to see Louis take all that in. And he is having a pretty decent time there at first, being a vampire. He's like, oh, this is kind of badass and incredible, and learning how to hear people's thoughts and things like that. Like he's having a fun little adventure, but then every time he starts to get kind of comfortable with it or really sort of more embrace it, he does something not quite proper, and Lestat kind of slaps him back like he's a petulant child, like, oh, you've done wrong, like he's scolding him. And I love, we talk about how much the changes they've made to Louis' character just gives him so much more richness and depth. And that's another thing you see as he changes and becomes a vampire. We talked last episode about how we don't think he would necessarily be in the business he is in without the circumstances he's dealing with. But then once he turns and he's a vampire, he's like, I'm about to own this shit. You know what I mean? And he really embraces his power. He sees himself as more powerful than he's been able to see himself as a black man, as a queer man, as a Creole. And it's just really, I think that's a really powerful, powerful switch for Louis that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
You know, we were just talking about the idea of like a bigger bad making a lesser villain seem like a hero. I think the same thing is true for Louis, right? Like the sins that he's committing as a mortal man, stealing and debauchery and the brothels and the gambling and all the things, they pale in comparison to the continual taking of human life, though, right? So, like, I think that's what it comes down to. He's a vampire now. He's taking life on a regular basis. So the dice games don't bother him so much.
Right. Oh, for sure. Yeah. But I think that it kind of puts him in a position where he sees an opportunity that might exceed race, the limitations that have been put on him and the societal limitations. You know, you see this possibility of this power, this literal and figurative power where you've got money, you've got someone to help you spend it in the smart way. You're working with someone who Lestat's been doing this for centuries. He's really good at hoarding the gold and creating more money. You know, they're all really good at that. And I just think he does get a little drunk on the power, you know, when they have their fight and Lestat's like, how can I make it up to you? And Louis is like, buy me the club, you know, and I think he sees an opportunity for a different existence, but then because of the facade he has to put up, he keeps running into that wall again. Oh, I can go to the opera with my boyfriend. Oh wait, I have to sit behind him because I'm black. I have to be his valet. You know, like just like every time he starts to make a move, somebody makes him feel like old Louis again.
So I discovered in this, speaking of that opera, by the way, I discovered in this episode why I love Lestat quite so much. He and I are both pretty fucking terrible at planning a date to say I'm sorry. This dude takes Louis to an opera, which we've already established. Like, Louis likes the opera. He lies to his mother and sister about that. But he is not a native of the opera in the same way that Lestat is. But he takes him to an opera where Louis literally has to pretend to be a servant and hide himself when the very thing that Louis wants to do is to not hide himself.
Be fucking seen. He wants to be fucking
Which, speaking
seen.
of, go way back to the beginning of the episode. So they leave the graveyard, they come into New Orleans proper, and they're beginning to hunt that first time. Louis, now turned, is wearing one of Lestat's coats. In the first episode, he always dressed himself. Here, I do not think this is an accident. I mean, obviously, in the moment, his clothes were bloody. They might have needed, you know, he probably just grabbed something, et cetera, et cetera. It makes sense too as a plot point. But I think it's like, I think this is telling us something. Louis is, in this phase, for these years that we see in this episode, he is clothing himself for Lestat. He has tried to leave the old Louis behind. He's like, boy, the old Louis was a lie, so I won't do that. And just as we discussed last week, like, who is Louis?
Right.
All other things aside. Right now, he's in his Lestat phase. And he imitates Lestat in the ways that he can, I think, is what's basically happening here. The coat is a symbol of that. I think the glasses are a symbol of that. You know, he continues to have this relationship with his family, or attempts to, although he's piss poor at that too, by the way. He goes, you know, months and months and years, I think, in the end, between seeing them.
5 years, I think it's past.
Yeah. When
and then we have to wonder if he's going to eat the fucking baby. Right. Jesus Christ.
There's a great line. Lestat's talking about the opera, and Louis goes, I almost ate my nephew, Lestat.
Right. He's like, Jesus Christ, man, you are not listening to me. This messed me up.
Yeah. Speaking of relationship advice from Lestat, that's a book we ought to write. You are a library of confusion. Maybe I'd have to say it in a French accent. I don't know, but I'm going to start using that when I'm in an argument with my wife. It sounds so much better than something like, well, that doesn't make any sense, or you're not being logical.
Don't be surprised if she throws something at you.
You are a library of confusion.
She's fucking, here's a book, you moron. Yeah, they fight really well. I like that, because they do. They drive each other crazy. They have it's not a healthy relationship, but I'm really happy that that we get to see all facets of it, although I'm sure, like we've discussed, it's amped up for our, viewing pleasure.
Okay, so I've got a nit to pick here, and I'm going to try to do this when we can through this series. We have shit-talked the Mayfair witches quite a bit, and we've, slobbered on this series quite a bit.
Well, look, we can't.
I do not understand how they make the mistake of having Lestat speak into Louis's head early in the episode, and then 2 scenes later specifically making it a plot point for this universe that Master and Fledgling can't speak to each other with their minds.
I come back to pick your nit because I see a difference.
Okay.
Because sending him, one is he can't read his mind, so
they can still speak telepathically, force a message.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's how I took it. That we can talk like this back and forth, but the problem is I'll never know what's behind that thought. I don't get to go deep into your brain. I don't get to see the visions. I don't get to see the things I can see from other people. We can only send words back and forth.
Yeah, that's very charitable. Do you remember, do they do it again in the rest of the season?
I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't believe they do. I don't believe they ever speak to each other again in their heads.
I had the same thought about that when it happened, and I was like, and I remember the first viewing, I had that same thought, and I was like, man, I don't know how I feel about this. And then I came up with a whole brilliant idea of why it was okay to me.
So I think in our first watch, we even talked about they could have, and I wish they would have made it more obviously something like this. The vampires can speak at a tone and volume
that's true too,
completely inaudible for humans, and yet from across a room. Armand does it for Louis in the theater at some point, I think, in the book, where he literally not in his head, but he says it out loud, but only Louis can hear. Louis and Claudia can hear it. Anyway, I don't know. In the books, Louis's telepathic abilities are all but non-existent. Anyway,
yeah, they are really pretty man. Most of his, but I don't know. Does he ever really explore the extent of his powers?
Yeah, he doesn't try. It's just like in the later novels, as different things happen, Louis probably capable of flight eventually, but he would never try it.
Right. Yeah. So because he's got all that. He's got tons of old ass blood in him. I mean, that's the thing is that Armand drank from Marius, who drank from Akasha. So, I mean, you're talking about, and then...
Yeah, he got Akasha secondhand at least twice. And
you're 6 degrees away from Akasha.
Yeah, I mean, he genuinely, Louis should be at least as strong as a child of the millennia in the novels anyway.
Yeah, and he just kind of half-asses along as a vampire.
Yeah. Anyway, I just... That scene bothers me, and I've never seen Rollin or anybody address it, and it's one of those things. And we'll have to we'll watch for that in the rest of the season. If they make it clear that a projected message is still available to them, but they can't actually read each other's thoughts, that I suppose that is a slightly different thing.
It's a total cheat, though. It's a total cheat. I mean, that is a cheat. Like, Marius couldn't call to Pandora.
Well, okay, so Louis says in this episode that he could go out on the balcony and hear the schemings of vampires from around the world. And we do know in the books that telepathic messages echo, right? You can hear them, you can hear the hubbub from other vampires when they hear a message, even if you can't hear the message directly.
Absolutely,
so
right.
If your maker is calling, you might not be able to hear it, but you can hear everybody else hearing it and reacting to it.
It's like getting hotboxed.
Yeah, I mean, if there was a third vampire in the room, you could say that it echoed off of him or something, I guess. Anyway, I wish, Rollin, I know you're a big fan. You listen to this, I'm sure, right? So
totally.
Go ahead and email us in and tell us what happened there.
Yeah.
as bad a teacher as Lestat is, he does tell. I mean, he literally lets him burn himself earlier. Like the first thing you learn as a parent is not to shake the baby, and the second thing is turn the pots, handle
the other
in
way,
so you don't flip them over onto the baby's head. And yet here he is letting the dude run out in the sun and burn himself. So as bad a teacher as he is, though, he tells Louis plainly that he can't keep seeing his family. Like, he tells him, and he doesn't come out and say, I too fucked with my family after I was made a vampire, and it was a really bad idea. And, my father hated me all the way to death, and I turned my mother into a vampire, and it sucked. She kind of hates me too. She's off in the jungle somewhere. I don't know. I don't know if we'll see her in the future.
We don't know.
Anyway,
we may talk about her later.
He doesn't say any of that. No. But he does at least tell him, like, hey, this isn't going to work. And he tells him later with the business, vampire business and human business, it's not going to mix well.
Yeah, not to mix. Well, and I mean, that's the thing is he does have knowledge. He's been doing this a while. And I do think that that's something that he stresses in the Vampire Lestat, like when he's telling his version of the story, he's like, no, I wasn't that shitty of a teacher, lest we all forget how shitty my maker was, who just was like, here's some gold, bye.
I'll be throwing up my deuces.
Right? I'm out. So, and he I think he sort of takes that personally almost. That's kind of a vibe I always felt like. He's like, this asshole makes it seem like I was just hateful. And we know that he wasn't, because we know how much he loves Louis. I mean, that doesn't preclude shitty behavior and being hateful by any stretch of the imagination. But I just, again, Armand's fucking with us hardcore, Joel.
I strongly agree. It's like we said last week, right? Like, Lestat is not a good ally. But also, I do think his heart's in the right place. Like, you can see it in this episode. He doesn't know how to teach Louis. Man, it's like, I don't know about you, Ashley, but I've done a lot of healing personally in the last 10 years or so as I begin to process who my parents are and how they did the best they could, right? Like, they're not perfect. And my father especially, there are a ton of things that I wish that he had done differently with us when we were young. But, like, he did the absolute best job that he could have with the tools that he had available to himself.
Right.
And I'm hoping 30 years from now, my kids will judge me with that same amount of grace. But like, that's the thing that I'm trying to give Lestat here. Although I will say this rewatch has reminded me this is absolutely Louis' story, so far anyway, not Lestat's. And Lestat is not nearly as well drawn in this series as Louis is. Jacob Anderson's performance is great. Sam Reed is amazing. But on the page, Sam Reed has a lot less to work with than Louis does. And you and I think most of our listeners, are filling in the blanks because we know what's to come and we know so much about this character.
Well, and when we do get those like softer, more genuine moments, he just kills it, And even when the moments are like, I guess, and he's like agreeing, and he knows he's wrong, but he's still acting like he wasn't really wrong. I know best, but okay, I see your point, kind of thing. He's just so fucking perfect. Like, he's, even when he's a shit, this casting job was just so well done. And I mean, good God, get into that coffin, sir. You're
right. We get another butt shot, by the way. I was thinking it was nudity early and then late. Oh, by the way, it's not just Sam Reed's naked ass. There's like 4 titties in this episode too that I had totally missed the first time.
I missed the titties this time. I was almost keeping up because I was like, sometimes I like to keep things. I like have like a show that I've watched before on in the background with headphones in while I'm doing something monotonous at work.
Absolutely.
And this is you got to be real careful with this show. We talked about it on the Facebook group. Like, headphones in and all. Like, somebody might come over and catch a titty or two anytime.
Yeah, some boobs and some buttocks. All
not
over.
safe for work.
This is not first season Game of Thrones level of like,
no
sex position. But
also, there's no sibling fucking yet, so thumbs up on that.
Yes, they do though. I noticed very early on they're driving through to collect the money from the henchman at the brothel, and
oh my god, and he's like, I fucking that woman in the doorway.
Yeah, and she's flashing him a boob. I love it. And then again, when Louis buys the brothel, there's a pan shot of like all of the people working for him and things going well, and there's 2 or 3 boobs in the background in that scene too.
Okay, I missed that. I missed the doorway titty. Because I was like, Jesus Christ, the eye fucking that's happening. This is so brilliant. The guy is in the background just murdering the scene.
But I love, though, that, I mean, and they talk about it explicitly in this episode, you know, Louis explaining the differences between the ocean that exists between who he is as a person and who Lestat is. And he goes, you know, queer. Half queer, sort of queer, mostly queer. I don't know. Non-discriminating, you know.
Yes.
But I love though that they are already calling that out. Louis' eye is always for the handsome man in the room, and it generally makes Lestat jealous. But Lestat also has a wandering eye, and there is a thing that Lestat genuinely craves in companionship that Louis doesn't offer. And it's not, you know, just the private parts, but there is something about femininity that he does not get from this relationship that he genuinely craves. So like, again, already here in the beginning, even while Lestat's doing his best, you know, to play the good partner, the cracks are showing is
right. Well, he's all the time getting entangled with a human woman all the time. Like he has so many entanglements, as the youth say.
Mommy issues, y'all.
He's got real mommy issues.
Fucking, but there's some real mommy issues in this show.
There's some real mommy issues. And then he loves like a nun. If he can find a nun, he'll really like a nun sometimes. Or just like a really.
But see, I think
like self-serving, like not like a service-oriented women.
Yes, well, but they are. I think they are all what he saw in his mother. Who his mother is now as a vampire is very different than who she was in life for him, right? And I think he, in the Gretchen, for instance, in Tale of the Body Thief.
So curious.
I think that is absolutely a stand-in for his mother in life. Also, it's not always young women, right? Like Gretchen in particular, I think is in her 40s.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is Lestat working out his mommy issues. We're way off track now though, because
we are.
It's just a little eye fucking in this episode. There's no mommy issues.
Just a little eye fucking. No mommy issues.
He does like a pretty lady though.
He really does, and I don't blame him. Don't we all?
Boy, ain't that the truth. Here's the thing that I wanted to get to though. In the final scene with the dessert. So Daniel and Louis, which by the way, now again, before we get there though, let's talk about the framing of this dinner. As we talked about in the beginning, like who's actually pulling the strings here? Who is doing this pantomime play for Daniel? Or if it's not for Daniel, like who is it for? The dinner is so fucking weird and cruel.
It's the weirdest fucking dinner party ever. Like what the fuck? He'll be here around round 7. Here's all these guys in masks and gloves. And I know we've talked about it, like this came out during COVID times. So like that kind of makes sense. But the more I think about it now, I catch myself really trying to get into those guys and like see their eyes. Like, are these fucking vampires? Are these all vampires? Is this the farm that they're talking about? Is it vampiric blood he's drinking? Do they have a farm of hot young men that come up here in masks and just get sucked off, for lack of a better phrase, occasionally by him? Like, what is happening in this building?
That's it. I don't feel confident in anyone's mortal or undead status in this penthouse. Okay, in the final scene though, the dessert scene, they're eating the ice cream and Daniel asks him, what does it taste like? And Louis says, like chalk, like nothing, like everything that I eat of human food. And yet he does it on a regular basis to maintain the thread.
Yeah. I loved that.
And then Daniel exposes a little bit because the dessert they're eating was mentioned in one of his memoirs. And so he tells a story about his first wife. And I had missed this part at the first watching. He had just proposed to her, and this story happens in his life right after he got his shit together, is what he says. Which means right after I got off the junk, right?
Right.
Which means right after I got away
from you guys.
Armand and Louis. And he just doesn't know it yet. Yeah, exactly. Like, that's the thing that occurred to me today. So I do wonder, it's like, were Armand and Louis there? Like, does Louis know? Did he see this scene from afar? You know, as they
did they have something to do with her?
Yes, like
did they send her to him? Fuck.
She? Yeah, all of that.
Like, what's everybody doing?
But at the same time, the sharing there between the two of them, to me, felt like the first genuine moment between the two of them.
Yes, and it's intimate.
Up until this point, Daniel has had his thorns out and has been throwing barbs and has had his guard up. You know, really, I think part of him was convinced that they had brought him there to kill him, you know, to eat him. For whatever reason, they were going to toy with him first and then they were going to kill him. And I think at this point, he's decided they're not. He still doesn't know what the hell he's there for, probably.
Well, it's weirdly intimate, too, because he reveals this dessert, but he doesn't tell that story in his memoir. Like, you can tell that's not a story he's told about her, about what she looks like, the fact that she dyed her eyebrow. And that he liked it best when she left it alone.
That, to me, is such a... I mean, and look, maybe that's a work, too. Maybe that's all... Maybe Daniel knows something about all of this and is playing with Louis there, too. But it didn't feel like it. It felt like such an intimate admission. The kind of thing that... You know, you literally only say to someone who you really love when you're sharing a moment, a broken moment, a forgotten moment, a lost moment,
a regret,
you know, whatever.
Like a real, true, in your soul regret, something you just wish, like you can tell there's this yearning there, something he wishes he had done differently.
It mirrors the moment earlier with Lestat at the opera where he's done this terrible, he's taken Louis on this horrible date, and yet too has such a moment where he says, there's one thing I fear most as a vampire, it's loneliness. Well, and he holds Louis' hand, touches Louis' hand.
Yes, and even within that scene is that they're in the box and they're watching the opera, and before they start revealing how terrible the tenor is.
Oh, it's so good. When Louis is enraptured by Lestat, how much Lestat enjoys music? Yeah, that's lovely.
Because like when you love someone, you love watching them love what they love. Like that's something so cool to experience. Like you go with the person you love to see their favorite band, and like to watch them watch their favorite band is just the coolest shit. Like it fills your heart up with love and intimacy in a really cool way that can be in a room or a stadium full of people. And I love that they caught that so well for me.
Yeah, I'll say that opera scene very much holds, though, both the good and the bad of that. Because, my wife will absolutely get a little misty-eyed when she sees me respond to, a great work of cinema, or I go see a new Star Wars movie and I'm really gushing and jumping about, oh my God, can you believe Luke Skywalker did this? You can see, boy, I love that childlike wonder. I went on a little rant the other day about Paul Muad'Dib from Dune, and she did not get that childlike wonder glow about her. Actually, it was more like tin can rattling with a rock in it, Joel. You got to knock that shit off, please.
Take that Dune bullshit somewhere else.
Yeah, the Quitsack Waterack? Yeah, I don't think so. Thank you very much, actually. No, she did like the Dune movie, but she did not care for my in-depth explanation of the 10,000 years worth of geopolitics for that universe. So
yeah, people don't like it when I go off on Clone Wars either.
You're right. Let me tell you about Ahsoka's journey. But I mean, like here, Louis is enraptured by how much Lestat loves music, and then he is disgusted by how passionate Lestat is about the butchering of this music, and that he's gonna, he says at one point, he says something like, you murder this man for what? For a few missed notes? No, he's murdering him because he's going to eat him, and he's going to eat somebody tonight, so it might as well be this terrible tenor, right? Like, I do love...
Well, spare everyone else from having to listen to this man. My God.
But I mean, Louis is just self-deluding, though. Like, he's willing to like, I mean, he's already murdered lots of people at this point, and yet he's chiding Lestat for murdering this guy, and I'm like, okay, so maybe don't toy
his problem's
with him.
more that Lestat plays with his food.
Yes, and later that, but he's already in a pissy mood when he hasn't started playing with him yet, is my thing. Is like, well, no, we were gonna eat tonight, babe. Like, are you mad that I had a burger? I eat burger. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. You didn't marry a vegetarian.
I'm vegan except for when I have steak.
And that's why I do feel Lestat when he says there, I don't say that you have to enjoy it.
Yes. yes, I love that. Well, and it's like the way the way he gets so like angry quickly. It's very scary. And it's so it makes it less out of nowhere when they actually get into physical fights later on, and this viewing, I having that awareness in my mind about how tough some of those scenes are that are coming up. It's a little like, I'm like, okay, they actually did build into this pretty fairly, and that's good to have seen that escalation.
Well, in Louis, it occurred to me in this episode, Louis throws the first punch, so to speak, in that the very first time they're ever actually violent in their relationship is Louis throwing Lestat into the door.
Into the wall, yeah.
Yeah, throws him into the wall when he leaves to go get burnt.
I totally caught
on that note, I might, if I was Lestat, if I hadn't have told him at that point, I'm definitely not hollering out, no, the sun, after you've thrown me into the wall. All right, asshole.
Yeah, you can go get a burner.
Enjoy that tan.
You're going to be fine tomorrow. Calm down.
Oh, goodness. Anyway, I am thoroughly enjoying watching this relationship unfold again, knowing everywhere that it goes, and allowing us to speculate truly on what is waiting behind those doors in the penthouse that we haven't opened yet.
Yeah. Well, and just the anticipation of things that are going to come up, that are going to happen. Like the anticipation I have of upcoming things is just bubbling. Like, I am so pumped. Like, Claudia, we've not even gotten there yet. And then I just, like, when she tries to run off in that scene in the railway car, like, I just keep having little flashes of those kinds of moments in my head where I'm like, oh shit, things are gonna get so crazy. And I'm so happy that they go there. I'm so happy that they haven't shied away from, like, I mean, I guess if you aren't savvy, like, you could watch this and this could be pretty over the top and kind of wild, but it's so, like, the commitment to the world is so great and so satisfying as a reader. Like, even we talk about changes and things like that and how it's kind of hampered Mayfair, but hasn't really, I mean, it's done nothing but improve Interview. And I just, high hopes for the second season, kids. Strongly
agree. Before you come back and hear us next week, by the way, go ahead and do your rewatch, if you want to, of episode 3 of season 1, Is My Very Nature That of the Devil. I'm going to give you a little spoiler warning here. Our boys get some strange. I don't know how else to put it.
You know what? They got some strange. Here we go.
Let's see how that goes. They're both such even keel, very, jealousy is never a problem with these
They're
two.
very rational, and I feel like the kind of people that should be involved in a throuple.
Oh, they're really made for an open relationship.
Yeah,
don't
they
you
are.
think? Yeah, absolutely.
These gentlemen do not need to be polyamorous. They do not understand the rules that are involved there.
It's like aggressive monogamy.
Murderous monogamy. But not you. Not you. Other people, but not you. Except for the one time I killed you and turned you into a vampire.
Of course. Of course. Of course.
Of course.
It's one of my favorite lines of the whole season, coming next week.
Yeah. Well, they hit one of mine tonight with the when he says to Louis, "I don't say you have to enjoy it."
That's what I don't say you have to enjoy it.
I love it. 'Cause it's like, I'm not saying you have to play with your fucking food, but if you don't like this, you can go out in the garden and eat some rats, bro. Like, I'm gonna have fun with the shitty dinner.
I personally, one of my tenets is don't yuck somebody's yum. I mean,
right,
that's
literally.
all Lestat's asking right there. He's like, look, asshole.
Look, I'm just having fun. I mean, is he torturing the poor guy? Absolutely. Is it absolutely fucking horrifying? And if I read about a serial killer doing it, would I tell everyone I know about how fucked up it is? 100%. But it's a fucking vampire, so c'est la vie.
C'est la vie indeed. All right, until we come back next week, that is going to wrap us up for this one. We'll continue our rewatch with episode 3, and thanks everybody for the great feedback. I did have one update. We mentioned last week in our novel discussion of the Vampire Armand, I had asked about the iconography, and I will just say nobody had a specific answer for me on that in the Facebook that I saw, but I did see one response that I thought was interesting. What if the Muslim faith, the Islamic faith, is literally part of the Rashid character? What if our Armand is not a Muslim, but Rashid is?
That's
We're going to meet real Rashid in season 2.
Right. And that's also how Armand might be hiding in Dubai if he has to be out doing business. But another thing I thought too is that at one point, so I'm sorry, I know we're wrapping up, but I just thought of this and I don't want to forget it.
Yeah.
When Louis is having his man meal, and the dude's talking to Daniel, and then he wanders off and then passes out in the hallway. Louis calls for Rashid, and I wonder, is it real Rashid or Armand Rashid that he called for?
Oh man, I didn't even think about it. So I immediately thought there's a in Marvel's Echo, the series that just came out recently.
Oh, yeah.
There is an amazing scene where Kingpin's sitting at dinner with Maya. The main character of the Echo show is deaf. He's sitting at dinner with Echo. Her back is turned to the front door of the apartment. Kingpin dismisses the interpreter that has been signing for him to Maya, and as she goes to leave the apartment, she's murdered in the front of the room because Maya can't hear the gunshot. It happens behind her, and so literally it's like steps away, and you don't know. And so tonight, as he stumbles off into the corridor, my thought was, is that corridor covered in plastic bags? And are they just going to cut that dude up on the way out, actually?
Well, yeah, or is Armand going to finish him off?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Louis says that he hasn't killed since 2000. Let's take him at his word.
Right.
But that he doesn't say nothing about what my boyfriend does.
Right. My boyfriend, he has his own hobbies. I've learned not to yuck someone's yum, apparently.
Exactly.
We also have confirmation that Joseph Potter is going to be playing Nicky.
Oh, thank you.
An interview season 2. And he has the sweetest baby face. Lestat's going to ruin his life.
Well, and not just baby face, but those curls, too. I kept thinking those are some Armand curls, right?
Yes. Yes, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and not only that he has been cast, but that he's going to have at least a few scenes in season 2. So I do think we're not just going to get some of the Armand and Lestat story. I think we might get quite a bit of, again, Armand's version of the Vampire Lestat.
Yes.
Very, very interesting. All right, that is going to wrap us up for tonight. Until we talk to you again, we've been your hosts. I'm Joel.
I'm Ashley.
And we are the Articulate Coven. Thanks for listening to The Articulate Coven. You can join our community on Facebook by following the links in the show notes or searching for Articulate Coven on Facebook. You can subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or at articulatecoven.com. And share us with your Anne Rice loving friends.